good evening, wherever you might be. My name is Sean and I'm delighted you joined us for today's ESPC community webinar. Today I'm joined by Aman Kumar, Microsoft, who will cover data security SharePoint. We love hearing you guys at today, so remember to join in conversation about today's webinar and more on X. Our handle is at ESPC_community and our hashtag is ESPC25. Tweet us, tag us, and tell us what you learned. Don't forget to check out our Learning Hub, which is updated with the latest blogs, ebooks, webinars, and how-to videos. You can access and view the Learning Hub by visiting our website, sharepointerap.com, and clicking Content tab at the top. Celebrate SharePoint Week with an exclusive ESPC offer. In honor of SharePoint Week, we're thrilled to unveil a special limited time promotion for ESPC. For the first 10 new bookings, we'll receive an extra €500 discount on top of the current late bird sale ticket price. Simply use the code SharePoint Week Special at checkout. This exclusive offer is our way of celebrating the SharePoint community's continued innovation, collaboration, and impact across the Microsoft ecosystem. Don't miss out, this promotion is valid only for new bookings made before October 31st or until all 10 discounted places are claimed. Secure your spot today and be part of Europe's premier Microsoft 365, AI, and Azure conference taking place in Dublin this December. After the webinar, we'll have a questions and answers session. Type any questions you might have into the chat box. Questions will be selected and answered at the end of the presentation. This webinar will be recorded and added to the Resource Center, where you'll be notified by email when it's available. And now I'm going to pass you over to today's webinar presenter, Aman. Hello, Aman. Thanks for joining us today.
Hello, a warm welcome to all of you, and good morning and good afternoon, wherever you are located. I'm on this side. I work as a senior cloud solution architect at Microsoft, mostly working around the data security within SharePoint and different workloads. So we'll just get started. I think it's really important, considering the time frame, that we shall dwell into the topics straight away. Do let me know once my screen is
Yep,
visible.
I can
Yeah,
see your
perfect.
screen. Perfect.
Then we can start with, I think we do have a packed agenda for today. We're going to talk about Microsoft information protection. That's really important to understand what sort of solutions we do have in cooperation with Microsoft information protection, which is being ingested within your Purview solution. We're going to talk about the sensitivity labels. We're going to talk about what sensitivity labels are, yeah, and what sort of applications we would have in sensitivity label, manual versus automatic. That's really important. And then we're going to dwell around data loss prevention. What is the difference between sensitivity labels and how data loss prevention can help organization to pack the data leakage scenario. So that's really important. And then the last topic we're going to cover around SharePoint is record management. So we're going to talk about retention policies. We're going to talk about record management, and not only that, we'll talk about retention labels as well. And what is the difference between sensitivity labels and retention labels as well. And once we are done, we're going to have 10 minutes or 15 minutes, depending upon the session, the Q&A. So please make sure you drop your all the questions in the sideline Dropbox, and we will take them once we are done with the session. I will not spend much time on the slide deck. I think I do have a presentation for you guys, but it's not a lengthier presentation. We're going to spend more time in doing demos because then I would be able to show you how you would be able to create and what going to be the end user results when we are creating these sensitivity labels, retention labels, or data loss prevention policy. But just to start with, what is Microsoft Information Protection? I think we do have a holistic security solutions ingested back into your Purview solution, which provide you the data encryption, for an example, data protection, for an example, and we do have solutions also packed with which will provide you assistance avoiding any sort of data leakages as well. So it's really important to understand these solutions, and these solutions comes in different frameworks. So when I talk about protecting your content, we do have sensitivity label, which can provide you help in terms of applying encryption and protecting the content within your SharePoint and OneDrive. We do have solution like data loss prevention policy. So if you really want and wish that users shall not be sharing any sort of business sensitive data outside the organization, we do have data loss prevention policy, to provide you guardrails in terms of that data shall not be, or the business critical data shall not be going and shared outside the organization as well. So we're going to look around that in terms of configuration part, in terms of what different flavors we do have within sensitivity labels, DLP, and even your retention policies. So when I talk about MIP or Microsoft Information Protection, we do have some sort of building blocks which we really like organization to inherit in terms of know your data. What data we are talking about, what is critical for you in terms of sits, in terms of sensitive info type. It totally depends upon organization to organization. It totally depends upon what geographical regions you guys are sitting into. It is important to know your data, where it is sitting. I mean, is it sitting on SharePoint? Is it sitting on Exchange? Is it sitting on third-party, storage providers, or maybe in your emails? Once you know your data, it is really important to protect them. I mean, you really don't wish a business critical data to be shared accidentally or intentionally inside or outside the organization. And you do have a solution like sensitivity labels to apply those protection and encryption over those content. And once you have protected that, it is equally important to have the data loss prevention policy in terms of providing those guardrails so the data shall not be flowing inside or outside the organization, depending upon different business scenario. So we'll quickly talk about what sensitivity labels and DLP is, just to make the context out of it. And then lastly, once you have protected your data, do you have any sort of business obligations to make sure you are retaining your content? Like for most of the finance industry, I know they have an obligation to retain the customer data for 7 to 9 years. So similarly, if you have any sort of business requirement, you can create retention policies. You can leverage retention labels. You can leverage records or regulatory records, which we're going to talk about. And then what is sensitivity label? Sensitivity label is a comprehensive solution embedded into your Purview portal, which provide you protection and encryption to your documents, emails. But today we're going to talk about more documents because we are talking about SharePoint. But then it will make sure that your document is encrypted. And even if it is going beyond the periphery of your organization, only the intended audience would be able to access the document. Even if the document has been forwarded to anyone, if they're not part of the sensitivity label permission, they would not be able to access it. Now, it is also important what are the capabilities. Again, you can apply sensitivity labels manually versus automatic. You can apply sensitivity label on the data which is already residing on your SharePoint and OneDrive. You can apply watermarking, headers. You can apply sensitivity labels not only onto the documents. You can extend them to emails, for an example, meetings, schematized data, and even the container level like SharePoint and Teams and M365 groups as well. And then it is tightly packed and integrated with different solutions like DLP, for an example. And we're going to talk about the integration part as well. Now, how to apply sensitivity label? So application is pretty much whether you want to apply it manually or whether you want to apply it automatically. Even in automatically, we do have different flavors. One is the client side sensitivity label versus you have service side sensitivity label. If you have documents which is at rest at your SharePoint and you really want to make sure you also apply them the sensitivity label based upon the criticality of the documents or sensitive info types, it is possible to apply sensitivity labels on the documents at rest. And then we have service-side labeling to help all the organization moving forward. Now, it is really important when we talk about sensitivity label, we need to understand sensitivity label is a persistent data protection. So that means when you apply sensitivity label and even the document is going outside the periphery of the organization, your sensitivity label is saved as a metadata within your document. So that means it will also provide protection and encryption even the document goes outside the periphery of the organization. So that's really important that this is a persistent side of data protection, which is part of your Microsoft information protection. The next, what we have is data loss prevention. Now, what is data loss prevention? So different organizations would have different scenarios where they really want to avoid any sort of data leakage outside or inside the organization. So if you really want, for an example, no one would be able to share the credit card information outside or inside the organization, you can create the guardrails with the help of data loss prevention, that anyone who is trying to send credit card information outside the organization, for an example, they shall be blocked. So it is possible with the help of data loss protection or data loss prevention, I would say that. And it comes in different flavors, like in terms of you can apply data loss preventions on SharePoint, OneDrive, Exchange, Teams, endpoints, even you can apply on Power BI. So there are different workloads where you can extend your data loss prevention. We do have building blocks when it comes to data loss prevention. So the building blocks is where you want to apply data loss prevention. So the very first one is location. It's really important. uh, and then on top of that, what condition you are framing into your data loss prevention. So condition could be, I really wish if there is a credit card information within the document, it shall not be shared outside the organization. So that's my condition. And once the condition is met, the data loss prevention should be triggered, and then there should be an action to it, whether you really want that document to be blocked outside the organization, or that document should be encrypted before it will get extended outside the organization. So we do have these three building blocks, which we're going to talk about and see within the demos as well. However, data loss prevention is a non-persistent form of the safeguard. So for an example, in sensitivity label, the sensitivity label, saved as a metadata, and even the document is going outside the organization, it is quite, encrypted and protected. Wherein data loss prevention is more workload centric. So if you apply data loss prevention on a SharePoint level, your content is absolutely secured. It shall not be going inside or outside the organization, depending upon what condition you have inherited within the policy. Uh, and if somebody tries to download the document on your client and try to send it over an email, for an example, the same document which was saved onto SharePoint, it is possible to share that outside the organization. And hence, it is really important to apply the data loss prevention policy on all the workloads, considering the holistic security scenarios, so that even the document is downloaded from SharePoint and OneDrive, it shall not be shared as an attachment within your email. So hence, we are talking about the holistic security. We highly recommend to apply data loss prevention guardrails across your workloads in terms of SharePoint, Teams, Exchange, even the devices. And the last thing what we're going to ponder over is data lifecycle management. So when I talk about the data lifecycle management, it's more about retaining the data, governing the data. If you have any sort of business requirements where you want to retain the data, we do have two different flavors. One is retention policy, helping you in terms of retaining the content over different workloads. For an example, SharePoint, Exchange, OneDrive, Teams, chat, for an example. And then you have retention label, which you would be extending or leveraging to the end user, so they can pick and choose the retention label based upon the criticality of the document. So they can say, okay, this is really important document, but I need to retain this for 2 years. So basically, retention label is for your admins to govern the data and retain the data depending upon the different organizational obligations. But retention labels is for the end user to consume, and based upon the criticality of the document, they would be able to apply the labels. Now, that was it for, I would say, the presentation side, because I really want to showcase all these functionalities and features in a demo form. So I will be now moving on to my tenant. And I have a couple of demos where I will be configuring sensitivity label, DLP, and retention labels and policy for you. And then I'm going to also share and extend what going to be the end user experience once these policies are being applied to the end user or the workloads. I will now move on to my tenant. And I am into solutions within my Purview, portal. Within the Purview portal, you do have different solutions. All the solutions are ingested based upon the different frameworks and the capabilities of what they have to protect your data and workloads. So I am within information protection. And when you go to your information protection, it gives you a tendency in terms of creating the sensitivity label. I do have many sensitivity labels created already, but once you are into the portal, you would be able to create the sensitivity label. For me, I have just created the demo in terms of created few labels based upon the criticality. So I've just created non-business label, for an example, what you can extend to the document library, for an example. General, internal, confidential, high confidential. The naming convention could be a little bit different in terms of your organizational demands. But once you have the naming conventions, and once you know what you need to achieve with these labels in terms of providing protection, encryption, watermarking, and even if you really want to extend them over to files or to the container level, then this is a good point in starting creating your sensitivity label from this user interface. So we'll just get here in terms of creating the sensitivity label. So we'll create one sensitivity label. I'll try to show you what configuration would have it, and then I'll show you the end user experience as well. So we'll create our first sensitivity label, ESPS conference, for an example, or let's say confidential. So that's the name, what the user will be able to see and apply over to the document. Then you have a display name to it. And then every time a label is created, it would have the highest priority. So I will talk about the importance of priority shortly. So I'll just keeping this in a parking lot as of now, and a description for the user. So I would not waste much time, but you can have a description as per your own business requirements, but I'll use the same name, and then description for the admins as well. We also have color coding now moving forward. Back in the days, if you want to apply the color coding, it was more a partial way of doing so. But now we do have a user interface to apply the color coding to the label as well. So I'll just choose amber for an example. I'll say next. Now you can decide whether you want to extend the sensitivity label to files and emails and meetings and groups and sites. But however, we are focusing more on to SharePoint today. So I'll just make sure I'll choose my email files, and then groups and sites as well. So once I'll move, so this is more about making sure that the label is being extended to the files, and this is more about you can apply sensitivity labels on Teams, for an example, SharePoint sites, for an example, and also M365 groups. I'll go next. Control access. Now, the control access is a backbone of sensitivity labels. So for an example, if I talk about control access, you are controlling who should have access when this label is applied on a content and the content is shared with the recipient. So what level of access they would have once they will receive the document with this label applied. So that's really important. And you can ingest the permission right now as an admin when you are writing the sensitivity label configuration. So I say I want to assign permission now, like now, and then user access to content expire, you can define once the user will receive a content, whether the access will expire in certain number of days, or you really want them to keep it forever. So I'll just say forever. And then allow offline access, whether users would be able to consume the content in the offline mode. Always does not literally meaning always. It means for 30 days, and after 30 days, on 31st day, user have to come back online and also need to re-authenticate, and then next 30 days cycle will be initiated again. And then I will assign a permission now. So for me, there are different flavors to assigning a permission. One is I will assign a permission for my users who are part of this tenant. What level of permission I can do? I can assign them owner, I can assign them editor, restricted editors, viewer, and custom permissions as well. I would always recommend to assess the given permission as per your business requirement. However, I would not recommend you to provide the owner rights, because then not only the user who has created the document and applied the label the very first time is the owner, but anyone who will be receiving a document would be considered as an owner, and they would be able to change the label. So it would not maintain the parity or consistency of the label applied. If I would apply editor, so that means once the user will receive this document with this label applied, they would be able to do anything, like in terms of view the content, save, print, copy, reply, forward, but they would not be able to change the label. So for this demo, I'll just keep it as editor. So that means I'm just providing all my users within this tenant as editor rights. I can provide any authenticated users rights as well. Any users and group, if you really want to create this for a specific group of audience, that's possible. And any email address or domain. So for an example, if you want to extend this to gmail.com, maybe your partner or a channel partner or a channel vendor is working on or using Gmail, for an example. you can make sure that only people who have Gmail address shall be able to open and access the document. That's possible with the help of sensitive labels as well. I'll go save. I'll say next. Content marking, you can apply content marking, watermarking, and even header and footer with the help of sensitivity label. So if I just say, I will say confidential for an example. I say save. I say next. And then you have automatic labeling. This is called as client-side automatic labeling, where if a user is writing a document, the label will be applied automatically, or the label will be recommended based upon the sensitivity, based upon the sensitive info type. So for an example, I want the label shall be applied every time if there is a credit card information. And in that case, I'm not dependent upon the user. The label will be applied automatically once the user is writing a document and there is a credit card information passed within the document. However, user can go back and remove it, or maybe change the label based upon the criticality of the document. Or I can say I don't want label to be applied automatically, rather it shall be recommended. And then I can have a policy tip for the end user that why this label has been applied, or why the organization is recommending the label. I'll go next. Now, these settings are for the container level. You can choose to apply privacy level, and you can choose to extend conditional access policy based upon the label applied. So when I say privacy, when this label will be applied, my SharePoint site, my Teams or M365 group would have a public, a privacy or a private, or a none. None means then you can choose between public and private while applying or creating the Teams or SharePoint site. You can also say whether the owner would be able to extend this M365 groups to people outside the organization. So even I would say, if an owner would be creating a SharePoint site and this label is applied, even owners would not be able to add any guest users within this M365 group. So that's possible to control with the help of sensitivity label. I'll go next. Then you have control external sharing from label SharePoint sites. We know that we do have a similar setting from SharePoint Admin Center, but this is more granular, right? So it might be that on your SharePoint Admin Center, the sharing capabilities are anyone. But here you can say if this label is applied, that means you would only be able to share the content from this given SharePoint site to inside the organization. So most least setting would win in terms of allowing users to share the content outside the organization. And then you have conditional access as well. You can say if a user is coming from unmanaged device, for an example, he should only have web access or a limited access to the document. So you can incorporate these requirements based upon the sensitivity label, because you do have the global settings, but this is more granular based upon the sensitivity label applied on SharePoint and OneDrive. Users would get capacity or capabilities what you have ingested within your sensitivity labels. So that's sort of how you create a manual and the automatic label. I'm going to first show you the demo for the end user experience, and then we're going to talk about service side labeling. So I do have this site available where I do have the labels applied to the document. So whenever you will create a label, you can, or whenever you will create a document, you would be able to extend them with the help of sensitivity label that would automatically apply protection and encryption, what you have ingested within your sensitivity label. For an example, if I say my document, and if I would say ESPC, for an example, project Zorgo, for an example, and then I will just go in and close this document, I can apply the labels from the detail panel. And then I can pick and choose my label, what I need to apply. So for an example, let's say this is a confidential document, I can just apply confidential. And once that's been applied, I would just need to click it here. It's going to be saved, and then the ESPX confidential will be applied automatically onto the document. So if I just refresh now, It should be pretty much quick, and then the ESPC's confidential label is being applied. You can also have a sensitivity label applied on a document library level, so that you're not dependent upon users to apply sensitivity label. So whenever it has been applied on a document library level, when the document is saved into a document library, it will inherit the label automatically from the document library. So then you know that you're not quite dependent upon the users. It will be inherited automatically from the document library level. But then if I go back, once you have created the label, it's not the end of the journey. You have to publish the label as well, depending upon your business requirements. Once you have decided what labels to be published, for an example, I choose confidential and high confidential. And then I can choose where I need to extend these labels to for all my users or a group of users, so that they can see and apply the label. So basically, they can interact with the label. I can choose user just provide a justification to remove a label or a lower its classification. So remember, I talked about the hierarchy. Whenever the user will go from higher classified label to a lower classified label, he has to provide the justification. So for an example, if I go in here, I do have, for an example, internal label. I say details. And within the details, if I say I want to just change the label to high confidential, for an example. So in that scenario, it will ask me a business justification. I haven't configured that, so that's the reason it is not showing, but I have to provide the business justification before it will change the label to high confidential. Require users to apply the label. So that means it is really important users to apply the labels. Unless they will apply the label, it will not allow them to save the content onto your SharePoint document library. So it's a sort of mandatory label what you can extend. And the last one, what we have in the configuration is default label. So you have a bunch of labels, and you want every time a user will open a fresh document where it has not been labeled manually, it will be applied label automatically based upon the configuration. However, user would be able to change it based upon the business requirements. Once that's been done, user would be able to consume this label from the UI and then would be able to extend it over to the documents. Now, what about the documents? Those are at rest within your SharePoint and OneDrive. You have tons and tons and millions of documents sitting at rest within your SharePoint. In that case, you can leverage these labels automatically based upon the criticality of the documents and based upon the sensitive info type. So for an example, if I talk about, I want to create a dummy policy, let's say ESPC, and then I would say next. I can say if the user would or if the document would have a credit card information, the label will be applied automatically, and then I can choose the label ESPC confidential. For an example, I say add, and then I would go next. I can say on my SharePoint side, I can write a rule here, and the rule could be advanced rule. For an example, I can say the new rule is whenever the document would have a credit card information, and then I can write a name, maybe SharePoint rule. I save it. In those scenario, whenever the document would have a credit card information, the label will be applied automatically, and this is called as server-side labeling. The good part is it will give you or it will leverage you to run this in a simulation mode, so you can see the content first in the Content Explorer, and then only you would be able to apply the label once you turn on the policy. So that was a nitty-gritty things about sensitivity label. And then we're going to jump over to the data loss prevention. And I will be taking questions once I'm done with the content. When I talk about data loss prevention, on top of the sensitivity label, it is sometimes important that the document shall not be leaked outside the organization. So you should have a guardrails in terms of data loss prevention, where the document shall not be going outside the organization or inside the organization, depending upon the business requirement and depending upon the SITs or sensitive info types, what is critical as a business for you. You can create a data loss prevention to create some different policies within SharePoint, stating that if there is a document with a credit card information, or if there is a document which is password protected, if there is a document with extensions, for an example, ABC or XYZ sitting on my SharePoint and OneDrive, it shall not be shared outside the organization. So in those scenarios, if you go and create a data loss prevention policy, you can extend them onto the location. So the very first building block, for an example, I would say ESPC demo. I would say next. And when I say next, I can choose my location. So I can extend my data loss prevention on Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, chat, devices, instances. But again, we are focusing upon SharePoint. So I'll just go in and make sure that I will only select SharePoint so that this DLP would be able to provide protection guardrails over SharePoint. If you want to extend it over to the devices or Exchange, as I stated, it is a non-persistent form of data protection. You really need to make sure that you would be creating data loss prevention in your other workloads as well. Now you need to create a rule. The second workload or the second building block is a condition. So I can say SharePoint rule, and then I can say add a condition. Now these are the conditions what we do have. A content contain, for an example, any sort of sensitivity label. So this is the integration example with your sensitivity label and data loss prevention policy. If the content has a label, let's say ESPC high confidential, and if my, not the label, but if I also have a sensitive info type sitting in my document as a credit card information, and then you can create a rule uh, based upon and an or operator. So for me, I've just created any of these, so or operator. So if content is labeled as high confidential or a content is containing my credit card information, what can I do? And on top of that, I can add if a content is being shared outside the organization. So I don't want any document which is being classified as high confidential and carrying my credit card information shall be shared outside the organization. I can create the action, and the action could be in different forms as well. Block everyone. So that means everyone will be blocked accessing the document except last owner, modifier, and site owner. And then I can say, okay, block only people outside the organization. So all, you cannot share any content with high confidential label and credit card information outside the organization, but your internal audience would still retain the content. So that's really, really important. Or the last option is block only people who were given access to the content through anonymous link. So basically, you are just making sure anonymous link would not be supported over the document, which is having my SIT, credit card information, and high confidential sensitivity label. So that's really important. And then once that's been done, you would be able to create the notifications. So for an example, the alert will be generated and sent to your SOC team, for an example. And then you can also provide policy tip to the end user that why they're not able to send this outside the organization, because it's really important to educate your end user as well in terms of the policy tip. And then policy tip can be uh, out of the box, and you can also build your custom policy type that as per the organization policy, we have observed that you do have a sensitive info type sitting onto your document, and you would not be able to share that outside the organization, for an example. You can also allow user to override the DLP policy in some scenario. However, user need to provide the business justification, and the business justification will be logged into the unified audit log. So for an example, a CTO or a CEO would have asked the user to share the document with a credit card information, and he has a business justification, so they can override the DLP policy. Please make sure you do assess if you provide the capability to override the DLP policy. But every time a user will do so, they have to provide a business justification. That's really, really important that you should assess it before you will allow users to just share this outside the organization. Now, what would be the end user experience when the data loss prevention will be applied, in terms of the organization level onto a given specific workload? For an example, SharePoint. If I go to my SharePoint, I do have the document library or a site where the conditions are being applied and assessed against the data loss prevention policy. The first, I'm going to show you what sort of conditions I have created in terms of my demo. So as soon as I will go here, I do have some sort of policies created for data loss prevention already. So first, I'm going to share that with you. That would make more sense. I can show the rules. And if I say edit, I say next, I say next, I say next, and then I do have some rules. For an example, if there is a document which has been classified as general all employees and somebody tries to share this outside the organization, it will be blocked. For an example, I do have a condition where a document is containing a credit card information and sent outside the organization, it shall be blocked. I do have one more policy, which I say, for this one, I say cancel. And for the other policy, what I did, I created another rule. I would have created them in the same policy. And then I do have a rule here as well. If a file is having an extension ABC or MP3, that shall be blocked. If a document would have a document property as, for an example, Oslo, or for an example, any location, that would be blocked. So based upon the different condition, so even if I go and create a different condition, document contain any sort of sensitive info type, document property is, document file extension is, document is password protected, for example, document is created by or greater than a size, for an example, or document contain any sort of business critical words and phrases. Based upon that, you can block the document to be shared inside and outside the organization. So once a user will upload these documents in a document library, and if your SharePoint site is within the data loss prevention policy, it will be blocked to be shared outside the organization. So I have a policy stating that if there is a document with extension ABC and MP3, that shall be blocked. So you can see these red icons. And if I hover over my details pane against this document, I would be able to read the policy tips as well. So let's see if it would take a little bit time. I'll select a different document, maybe this one, and then I'll go on this, and then I can read my policy tip as well. So this document would have a credit card information, and you can customize the policy tip just to give education to the end user as well. And then based upon that, end user would understand that this is a document with a credit card information, and that's the reason I'm not able to share this outside the organization. I also have a policy created. These two are absolutely same document. So if I talk about sales contract, these two are absolutely copy of each other, but this is blocked, this is not. Why? Because I do have a condition when the document is classified as general all employees, and if somebody's tried to share this outside the organization, the document shall be blocked. So I've tried sharing this document outside the organization, that's the reason this is being blocked. But this is not because I haven't tried sharing this outside the organization. So you can create different conditions, and once the conditions are met, the actions will be reciprocated back onto the document library and documents within those SharePoint sites. So that those two solutions are part of MIP, I would say, that sensitivity label and DLP, which will provide you holistic security to make sure avoiding any sort of data leakage or data exfiltration as well. On top of that, we do have a governance. Now, we do have data lifecycle management requirements with many organizations, and we do have solutions incorporated within your purview solutions as well. And then when I talk about the solutions, we do have data lifecycle management, where you would be able to create retention policy. So retention policy is more about retaining the content based upon the different business obligations. You can retain the content from months or days to years, depending upon the business requirements. For an example, let's say I work in a banking sector or a financial sectors. I want to retain a content for, let's say, 5 years. I can say retain content. So I will just say, and then I would say next. I can say I want to retain a content for specific period of time. I can even say enforce action after a specific period of time, or just label it. I don't want to retain a content, but I want to classify for my compliance requirement. But in this case, just to give you a brief scenario, let's say I have a business requirement to retain a content for 5 years. I do have different templates. I can choose 5 year. You can also custom to few months or days based upon your requirement. I want to retain a content for 5 years within my SharePoint based upon when it is created. So that means when the content is born into SharePoint, you would be able to retain the content for next 5 years. I always recommend my customers to do when items were last modified for all the business critical sites. So that means, uh, let's say, imagine a scenario, you have a content within the SharePoint that has been modified after 2 years. Once the content is modified, the retention period will be recycled back to 5 years. So always making sure you have a retention extended to your business critical documentation. So hence, it will make sure that the content will be retained for 5 years, despite the user will be deleting it from the SharePoint library. It will be getting disappeared from the user's, let's say, visibility, but it will be saved into a preservation folder. That's a hidden folder, which site owners would have access to, and will be retained for the next 5 years. It's pretty much quite easy. And then after the 5 years, what needs to be done? Do you need to delete the content from the original source location? Start a disposition review. Disposition review is record management functionality, E5 functionality. So that means the content will not be deleted, but the mail will be sent to a reviewer. And then the reviewer has to review the content, and reviewer can take certain actions, whether they confirm, yes, I want to delete it, or extend the retention period for a few more months, or apply the retention label altogether. You can change the label from X to A or A to X depending upon the criticality of the document. Run a Power Automate, sending an email to the owner, for an example, to review the content because it's near to the deletion part or the retention period is over. Do you really want to apply the retention label one more time, or you confirm that you don't need or have a business obligation to retain the content? And then deactivate the retention setting. So that means we will deactivate all the retention settings. We will stop retaining the content. However, your content will still be retained at the original source location. So that's the power of retention policy. On top of that, you do have a custom solution as well, which is called as retention labels, which you would be able to leverage for the end user to apply based upon the content, and they can decide, okay, whether they need to apply the retention labels uh, based upon the criticality of the document, 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, and for a specific period of time. So the difference between sensitivity labels and retention label is sensitivity label provide you protection and encryption, wherein retention label will provide you a mechanism to retain the content for a specified period of time. So if I go to my policies here, I go to my, for an example, retention labels. I can create a label now. I can say ESPC demo retention 1 year. So that means I'm leveraging this label to the end user, so they can pick and choose and apply the label based upon the criticality of the document. And then I can say, I want user to apply this label, and the label will be retaining the content for 1 year. Again, it has a similar user interface as retention policy, with a quick difference I will let you know shortly. And then you have when items were created. So it will start calculating 1 year from the day item are born into SharePoint, when items were labeled, and when items were last modified. So I always recommend users to apply when items were labeled. So that means you are getting the right frame of time, right time frame. So from the day you apply the label, it will start calculating the day from that particular day. So that's really, really important to understand. So you will get 1 year when you will apply the label into your SharePoint document library or SharePoint document, because you can also extend SharePoint retention labels over the document libraries. So that means when you drop a document, the document will be inheriting the retention label from the document library, quite similar to the sensitivity label, because you can apply sensitivity label and retention label both on a document library level. When the document will be dropped, you are not dependent upon the users. The retention label and the sensitivity label will be inherited automatically. And then once this has been created, uh, quite similar options what you have in retention policy. However, the difference is in retention policy, you don't have to publish it. You just have to create it and publish it. But in retention label, you first have to create a retention label and then publish it afterwards. So if I say, now I need to publish my retention label so that end users would be able to see it and consume it, I need to go in my publishing policy. I can choose the label. what I want to publish. For an example, I just choose two labels at random. And next, I can apply the labels onto my static scope. So that means onto my SharePoint, OneDrive, Exchange, and Office 365 group. And then once that's been selected, I just need to provide the name, and the labels will be rendered for the end users to be consumed. And I'm going to show you the end user behavior of it. So if I go to my SharePoint site within my record management, whenever I will create a document, for an example, I create a document from here, ESPC, and then I would say demo. I'll copy this. I close the document. I'll quickly refresh it. And then I do have a document where I can apply the label. I can say apply the label for 1 year. And once you apply it, the label has been applied. As an end user, I can still go and delete it. So I can delete it. Let's say I will delete it. That's absolutely fine. It will fall into my retention or recycle bin for 93 days, and that's it. However, I also know that I do have a retention with the help of retention label. As an admin, I can now go to my, for an example, preservation whole library, and there's the copy of the document, and it will be retained for next 1 year until my retention period is over from my retention label. On top of that, you also have a record management where you can create your regulatory records. So that's really, really important. So when I talk about the regulatory records or record management, you will go to your, and you can also extend retention labels automatically. So you can apply retention labels automatically as well, based upon the criticality of the document. For example, if I go to my label policy, I'll go to my auto apply label. And when I go to my auto apply label, I can say, let's say dummy, I can say if there is a specific sensitive information or a specific word or a trainable classifiers, or even to the cloud attachments, when you share the documents via cloud attachments, the label will be applied automatically. And then I can say, okay, if a document would have, for an example, credit card information, I really love credit card information. That's pretty much easy to connect with everyone. And then I would say credit card, then this label would be applied automatically. So basically, you are making sure the label will be applied automatically to the document sitting at rest whenever the information is found within my SharePoint, for an example. And then I can add a label. Okay, which label I need to apply once there is a credit card information, and then I can say, okay, retain for 1 year. So that's the automatic form of applying the retention labels as well. On top of that, you do have a record management, where you really want your document shall not be deleted for the specified or the interim period of time frame. You can go to your file plan. You can create a document, a sensitivity label with record management and regulatory record management capabilities. So for, I'd say, dummy record, I say next, I extend, and then you will have quite similar window what we have seen within your retention policy, retention label. But in here, you do have two different options. One is record. So record is when you really want to make sure that your document shall not be deleted from the user interface either. You will mask your document as a record. So that means it will live into your SharePoint document library until the retention period would be ingested within your policies. And the second one is regulatory record. So that means nobody would be able to change or delete the document, until the retention period is over. So record, you can mark document as record, as nobody would be able to change it, nobody would be able to delete it. But regulatory record is that once it has been created, you would not be able to rename it. You would not be able to delete from your user interface in your Purview portal. However, you can only extend the retention period. Even if you apply the regulatory record, even the admin would not be able to change it from the document library side of it. So for an example, I go into my record management. I create a document. ESPC, let's say, record one. Once the document is created now, I can just maybe rename it as this one. I close it. I apply my label or retention label, and then I choose I want to apply a retention label as record. So we will just wait for it. Some delays. Let's see now. And then I will go in here. I apply the label as record. And as soon as I will apply the label as record, you can see there is a padlock against it. So even if I try to delete it now, I will not be able to delete it. So it will give me a warning, you see here. So there is a warning that I would not be able to delete it. Even if I would able to open in the web, I would not be able to make any sort of amendments. That's into the read only. So that means it has been locked for the amendment. It has been locked for the deletion as well. You would not be able to delete it. You would not be able to go ahead and amend the document. However, if there is any sort of business requirement to do that, it is still possible. If you have more than contributor rights, you would be able to unlock it. And once you would be able to unlock it, you would be able to make the changes. If now I will open the document, I would be able to make the changes. For an example, now I would say uh, uh, changes, for an example, and then it will be saved. However, I cannot still delete the document. So if I now try to even delete the document, I would not be able to delete the document either. So if I say delete, I would not be able to delete the document. You see the warning, because it is still a record. But I can go as a site admin and change my record to any other label. So down in the line, if I feel so, no, this is not the record, I need to change it for a specified period of time, I can change it. And now it will work as a normal. So it is just taking time to get saved, but I can change it. Now on top of that, we do have regulatory record. So if I go in now, and I would change this to as ESPC, let's say project. For an example, I create a document. It is being saved. I just refresh my screen. And if I now apply the label as regulatory record, it will give you a warning, because it will show you that once this label has been applied, uh, you would not be able to change it despite you are a global administrator or despite you are a site administrator. So then I would go in here, I will apply a regulatory record, and there is a warning. After it's applied, you won't be able to edit or delete the items, and neither you nor administrators in your organization will be able to change or remove the label. So that's pretty much locked. And if I apply it, it is being locked now. Nobody would be able to change it. Nobody would be able to delete it. And even if I'm the admin, I would not be able to unlock. I would not be able to change my regulatory record as well. So difference between record and the regulatory record is you can still lock and unlock records. You cannot do locking and unlocking with a regulatory record. And if you are a site admin, you would be able to change the record to any other label at any given point in time. But despite I'm a global admin or I'm the admin on a SharePoint site, I would not be able to make changes once the regulatory record has been applied. So basically, this will live forever until the retention period is over. So that's the difference between regulatory record and record. So just in a nutshell, before we start the Q&A session, we have gone through the sensitivity label, which is responsible to provide you encryption and protection. We have gone through the data loss prevention policy, which is really important to provide you guardrails in terms of the data leakage, avoiding data leakages so that the data cannot be going outside the periphery of the organization or inside based upon the sensitive info types. We have talked about retention policies. We have talked about data lifecycle management in terms of retention labels and retention policies. And then we have talked about the record management over SharePoint, applying records and regulatory records within the SharePoint itself. Now I'm open for any Q&A you would have. Cian, would that be possible for you to read any questions if we would have
Yep.
any?
Yeah, so there's a good few questions in, Amanda. I see Rashmi has been answering a good few. But when labels, sorry, for lifecycle and disposition, if a reviewer is now to go and review thousands of docs, is there a better way to make this in bulk or more appropriate for large sale reviews?
We would be able to extend to different stages. So I know that it's a cumbersome job if a reviewer wants to go and review the documents lying there, thousands of documents. We can move this on a stage wise where you do have different reviewers so that it will fall in not onto a single reviewer. We would have different reviewers reviewing those documents. So we can create stages within the disposition review, and you can also power automate that in terms of automatizing things. I mean, rather being just making sure uh, the document is waiting for the reviewer to review. You can say for the time being, the different label is applied. For an example, extending the document from 1 year to 3 months, for an example. Or running a power automate, sending emails not only to the reviewer but also the owner of the document, that he can review whether he wants to extend the label further, or he wants to retain the documents further. So there are different provisions depending upon your business requirements. But certainly, if I talk about there are alternatives in terms of running the power automates, making sure you do have different stages of the reviewer, so which can be applied within the organization depending upon the business requirements. Yes.
Perfect. Next question is is E5 needed for this? Um,
For disposition review, yes, you need E5 because that's a record management capability. Yes, of course.
Perfect. Next question is if a Word document already contains a sensitivity label before being uploaded to SharePoint online, can SharePoint automatically read that label and populate the sensitivity column accordingly?
Yes, for all the Office files and PDF files, the answer is yes. So imagine a scenario: you're applying a document or applying a sensitivity label on your client, confidential. As soon as you will drop that document into a SharePoint document library, it will read it, and within the sensitivity column, it will populate the label as well. So basically, making sure that you can visit the label as well. So you can see the labels for Office files and PDFs both. So it will read it for you.
Perfect. Next question is auto labels deployed at rest. What if I have a very restrictive label set automatically, but change my mind and now want to lower it? Does that work with auto labeling too to lower a previous set label?
The answer is no. You can go from lower classification to high classification, but you cannot go from higher classification to the lower classification in terms of applying sensitivity label for the documents at rest. And then you have APIs for that. In that case, you would be able to run the APIs, or if you have a super user access, you can run PowerShell to achieve that, but not from the service side labeling.
Perfect. Next question is if a label is applied at doclib level and the document that has already a different label, which one will remain? The dict
So
label do overwrite or the document label remains as it was set before the upload? And finally, is there rules saying the most restrictive labels wins?
okay, so manual applied label is always win over the automatic apply label. So that's a normal thumb rule. So if you have applied the labels manually and just shifted to the document library label would not be taking place, and also making sure that it will not be applying labels from the document library side of it. However, if you do have a default label applied to a document library, not the document library, but to the document, and then drop the document to the document library level. And if the document library default label have a higher strength in terms of the hierarchy, it will override. So manual applied will never be overwritten by document library label. But if you have a default label which is in lower hierarchy, that will be copied over to a SharePoint document library, that will be overridden by the document library level if the hierarchy would be higher than the default applied label.
Perfect. Next question is there a way to easily filter slash search for sensitive labels? Example, want to filter all files tagged with confidential from the library view.
Oh, absolutely. You do have Content Explorer and Data Explorer to look into it. Wherever the label has been applied to a document library, you can use it. You can use content search. So for an example, you really want to see how many documents has been applied with confidential label or higher confidential label. You can use content search, or you can use content explorer to look into it. And even you have activity explorer to see what all document have been applied, what all labels from last 30 days as well. So that's possible.
Perfect. And the last question is, what is included out of the box, and when do we need licenses for Purview?
So when I talk about applying DLP on SharePoint, that's included in E3 and E5 both. When I talk about the sensitivity label, applying sensitivity label manually is included in E3. However, if you want to apply sensitivity label automatically, that comes under E5. If I talk about applying retention policy and retention label manually, that comes under E3. If I talk about applying retention labels automatically and talk about the record management in terms of applying records and regulatory records, that comes or fall under E5 license.
Perfect. So I think another question came in. Copilot access can be limited to some documents, for example, when they're no more accessed for a certain period, stale data.
Okay, so when I talk about the Copilot, you can now go in and create data loss prevention policy. In order to make sure, you can say that if the document is classified as high confidential, DLP policy can ask Copilot to not process those documents before the results are being rendered. So basically, Copilot will not process any document which has been classified as high confidential. That situation or that scenarios can be covered by data loss prevention policy. However, if you don't have edit rights with the help of sensitivity label to any document, although you do have view rights, then also Copilot would not be able to process the documents if they are being applied label and you don't have edit or I would say extract permission. So extract permission is really important to process the document from the sensitivity label sides, but you can have rules created in DLP stating that, okay, even the document I do have access and more than extract permission, please make sure whenever I am writing a prompt, Copilot should not be processing any document which has been classified as high confidential.
Perfect. Another question came in there is, what is the difference between DLP and Power Platform DLP?
Okay, so you can extend the DLP on Power Platform in terms of when you extract the data and extract the data. In those scenarios, DLP will comes under the point. So if you have extracted data, for an example, and you really want and wish that data shall not be shared outside or inside the organization based upon the sensitivity of the content, or let's say any sort of critical information within the content, that can be achieved and applied boundaries with the help of data loss prevention as well.
Perfect. So on behalf of the ESPC community, we'd like to send a big thank you to you again, Aman, for taking time out today to carry this webinar. Really appreciate it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And if you have any further questions, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I won't mind answering questions over the LinkedIn. You can reach out to me directly as well. Perfect. Thank you so much for joining, and hope you have a great session and a great learning as well.
Perfect.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.